Will the council come to order, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Anderson?
Present.
Oliver? Absent? We'll say absent. Ford?
Here.
Mayor Smith is absent. Mattingly?
Here.
Sutphin?
Here.
Watson?
Present.
And Mayor Harry Smith is out of town, so I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. We will start tonight with a presentation on the St. Luke and Oddfellows Hall.
We want to say the pledge first?
I think that's
second
only,
meeting of the month. We don't.
We only do it once a month?
We do it on the first meeting.
Once a month.
Yep. Yep.
excuse me. Yeah,
Seems
that'll be
weird.
fine.
Yeah. This is technically the continuation of the first meeting. That's what I was told at some point. So, yeah. So Carol Davis will have the presentation on the St. Luke and Oddfellows Hall.
Okay, good evening, Council. I know I presented this to you at our work session, but I do have a handful of very small updates. I'll wait for Councilwoman Colliver to get to her seat. You're fine. So, as you know, that this is the St. Luke and Oddfellows site is a building located in the former African American community of Newtown. The first plot of land in that community was purchased by Gilbert Vaughn, who had been formerly enslaved in 1874. And then the community of Newtown grew up around that over time. In 1905, the site was purchased where the St. Luke and Oddfellows Hall construction began that same year on that building. And that also starts the period of time that was established by both the state and national historic registration of the period of significance, so 1905 to 1955. Here is a map that was created by our town's GIS director in collaboration with some members of the community who are doing volunteer genealogical research. The property up there that it sort of crosses over where modern day Price's Fork enters the traffic circle, that is Gilbert Vaughn's original property. And then just below that, the red square shows where the St. Luke and Oddfellows Hall currently stands. And then you can see all of the other original Newtown property owners shown on both sides of that older alignment of Gilbert Street. And I will note that this map is available to you all. There's a link to the map. And that was, again, made in collaboration with our GIS director who did a lot of work to try to get that overlay properly situated on this modern landscape so people can have a better sense of where that community was. So beyond that initial beginning history, so it was in operation as a community center gathering space and the home of the Order of St. Luke and Oddfellows. After those organizations became defunct in the 1960s, the building was semi-vacant and alternately used for storage and or as a woodworking shop. We don't have precise dates for this, but roughly the 1960s to the 1990s. And then in 2003, the building was struck by a delivery truck and significantly damaged. And the image in the lower right shows how far off of the foundation the building was shifted, which turned out to be a bit of good luck in the end because it drew a lot of attention to the building and renewed interest in what it meant to the community historically and also how to perhaps preserve it. So again, because the Oddfellows who owned the hall was defunct as an organization, there was not clear ownership of the building, and so in order to rectify that, a local judge, Montgomery County judge, established 3 trustees who were descended from members of the community who had originally built the hall or who were members of the Oddfellows Hall or Oddfellows Order. And so that was Beatrice Walker, Walter Lewis, and Aubrey Mills Sr. And in fact, 2 members of our current working group, which I'll talk about in a moment, are direct descendants of these trustees, so that there's sort of this through line of people who have direct relationship to that building. Also in this time frame, after the building was struck, after the trustees were named, a deed of gift was drafted with some conditions established for how the building would be treated going forward. State and national historic designations were both sought and attained. And then the building and site were donated to the town of Blacksburg via that deed of gift. And lastly, a feasibility study for stabilizing and restoring the building was completed. And I have links at the bottom here. There's a PDF of this presentation in the folder that I can also happy to email to you all, that you can access all of these documents there. So the deed of gift, the National Register of Historic Places form, and the feasibility study. And then, so after that was completed, plans were developed to do an initial restoration of the building and reopen it as a museum. Here is a picture of Nikki Giovanni at the reopening of the building, reading her poem, A Theory of Pole Beans. If you have a chance, I suggest you Google it. It's really a lovely poem and speaks to the importance of community and simple things. And then in that same year that the building was reopened as a museum, the Blacksburg Museum and Cultural Foundation, which had operated as a committee within the town governance structure, was established as a separate nonprofit entity. And again, I've got links here to the architectural drawings for the restoration. Then we're fast forwarding about 15 years, and as you all well know, in the summer and fall of 2023, some community members came forward with concerns and questions about not just the building itself, but also conditions of the deed of gift that they felt could be more meaningfully honored. As you know, Mark appointed a working group of people that he felt were really well positioned to present different perspectives regarding this building and its history. I think we have a handful of members. We have a member, 2 members of our working group here. So here are the members of the working group. Susan Anderson, John Bush, Jesse, who's here, Christine King and Latanya Walker, who are descended from those trustees, Joanne Price, an original resident of Newtown, and Tom Sherman, who was instrumental in the initial restoration of the building. And many of these people also serve on committees or are on the board of the Museum Foundation, so overlapping relationships with this building. We also got a clear charge of what we were to do as a working group, and then began meeting in November of 2023, and we met for just over a year, 14 months, and I'm going to detail for you what we did together. So first off, our starting point was to evaluate the recommended actions from the 2023 CAP report. That's the Conservation Assessment Program Survey that was performed by or at the direction of the previous museum director. The group also evaluated elements that they internally identified as working group members, and then later, as we brought on our professional project team, they evaluated those elements that came to light as those professionals got into the building and were making observations and recommendations to us. So here were the elements, I think 32 in all, that we ended up spending a great deal of time discussing, evaluating, and coming up with a set of recommended actions. But to begin our process, I think it was really important. As a working group, there was a lot of question and, quite frankly, confusion about what would or would not be permissible in the context of a building that has a state or historic designation. There was a feeling of constraint that maybe we can't do this. We would like to do this, but we're not sure. So one of the first things we did was invite in Michael Pulis, who is an architectural historian for the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. And he was very generous to come down and meet with us in person. And not only did he have specific guidance for the group where we had questions like, is it okay to put in storm windows, right? What can we do about the damaged plaster? But he also had excellent high-level guidance on really how should you be thinking about this as a building and what is acceptable. And so here are some of these general guidance and recommendations. He noted that building owners and managers of historic buildings actually have quite a bit of flexibility for restoration or further restoration of a building, but that it's key to identify the character-defining features and protect them to the greatest degree possible. He also noted that there is an inherent tension between a restoration or preservation approach, which is essentially to turn the building into a museum locked in amber in a particular period of time. You can do a restoration that brings it all the way back to its first moment or some moment that you pick in its history that seems historically important. And so that's one end of the historic perspective. And then the other is rehabilitation, where you will repair the building and use it functionally as a modern building. And there's a great deal of leeway within that continuum that are all appropriate from a historic perspective. It's just essentially his guidance was, these are all appropriate, but you have to make choices as the building owner and manager in collaboration with the community. And there's not an exact right way to do this, although he did note there are many wrong ways to go about it. We're not going to paint the building hot pink. That would be a wrong way to go about it. But within that, there's quite a bit of leeway. But he did note that when you're talking about character-defining features, it's really important to get expert guidance. And lastly, that balanced approach really is pretty normal. You don't have to pick one side or other of that continuum. So on the topic of expert guidance, the town hired Colley Architects to provide that for us and also oversee the work of some of the other experts that we brought into the process, notably Truesdell Engineering, who provided us some guidance on the structural engineering elements, Salas O'Brien, who took a look at our electrical and HVAC systems, and BCA, who came and did a historic paint analysis. And really what Colley Architects provided for us is, as the data came in from these other experts, they brought that architectural lens to say, okay, like in the example of perhaps the HVAC system, a recommendation to replace that. And then Colley said, here's how you could do that in a way that is architecturally unobtrusive with the historic nature of the building. So that was the lens that they brought to the work. So I'm just going to walk you through some of the key findings from each of those experts. The structural report from Jordan Truesdell basically found that the foundation is in good shape, and also is the first floor, which had been structurally reinforced during the 2009 restoration. Both of those had been shored up based on the damage from being collided with. And that the first floor actually is structurally so sound it can support up to 75 standing occupants, which if you've been in the Oddfellows Hall would be quite a few people. That was in tension with the initial designation of building type, which was exhibit, gallery, and museum, which had sort of artificially kept that occupancy at 25. The thing that the working group was wrestling with is that getting to a higher occupancy was desired, but raising it above 50 would have required replacement of a character-defining feature, which is the historic doors. It would have required those panic-style doors with a push bar. And so they decided that a balanced approach was what they wanted to do, which is change the building type designation to assembly, which is higher, but cap the maximum capacity at 49 to retain those historic doors. Another finding from the structural engineer is that the stage is not as structurally sound as the first floor. It's only capable of supporting about a third the weight of the first floor, and in collaboration with Colley Architects and Truesdell Engineering, we feel that the working group felt that we could add sub-bracing to increase that capacity to be in line with the first floor without altering its appearance. So that was supported by the working group. Similarly, they found that the second floor is also far weaker than the first and really cannot accommodate much. Up to 10 people with no storage, or 4 people with up to 400 pounds of stored items. And while Truesdell Engineering advised that you could structurally reinforce the second floor, that would require some pretty significant changes to the walls and ceilings of the first floor, so this was not supported by the working group. So I'll pause there to see if you have any questions before I dive into electrical. Okay.
Questions?
So the Salas O'Brien again performed our analysis of electrical and HVAC systems. Generally, electrical system is in good shape. It was replaced during 2009 and is in good condition. And also there is extra capacity in the electrical panel for additional elements, which is good because we are adding some. The two big ones are an EMS network security and fire detection system to protect the building when it is unoccupied. And also to add museum-rated LED fixtures that can be used if artifacts are on display. That's a safer lighting system for fragile artifacts. Similarly, the HVAC system is really underperforming. That's due in part to the building itself being leaky, but also the system being undersized for the space. And also adding a dehumidifier on the second floor with a drain routed away from the foundation, and to further improve both humidity and temperature control, to have an energy audit performed on the building, to see if there are opportunities to further tighten up that building and make it more energy efficient. So moving on to the historic paint analysis, this was a recommendation that emerged from the working group as we were having iterative conversations about interior finishes. The group felt that they weren't well positioned to make good decisions about that without understanding what the original surfaces and finishes were. So we had BCA come down from, I believe, Arlington or Alexandria. They have a lot of experience in this type of work. They took 10 samples from interior surfaces throughout the building and developed photomicrographs for each sample that showed what was there under natural and ultraviolet light, and they were able to provide us with commercially available color matches to what was the original color scheme. And their finding was most of the wooden elements in the building were really just unvarnished, unstained, unpainted wood with just a simple clear coating, with two notable exceptions. One, here's the photomicrograph shown of the double doors, and they were able to discern, and I do not know how they are able to discern that from this photomicrograph, but that there was an early faux wood graining finish, likely imitating mahogany, and then a second later one likely imitating oak. So we're evaluating opportunities to restore that finish. And then another anomaly is that the stage apron, which is currently painted white, appears to have been painted sort of a darker reddish brown, which we don't know for certain, but seems to very closely match the paint that's on the ceremonial historic podiums, and very likely is the same color paint. It really looks almost exact. And so that'll be nice to be able to restore that. So the BC report essentially gave us options that would all be historically appropriate within the building's period of significance, and we brought it to the working group for their evaluation. And after some discussion and taking a look at some samples, they were in support of trying as best as practicable to restore earlier colors and finishes. And if Lorraine was able to get the right slide up, I was actually in the building today with a historic paint restoration specialist. He's testing out some areas so that both museum staff and the working group can evaluate what these might really look like in real life. Nope, it's not there. But I have fantastic pictures that I'll send to you later, where he was able to take a look at the ceiling where there was significant water staining and remove that layer of kind of peachy salmon-colored paint and get down to bare wood. And I'm happy to report that it looks really fantastic. Even just what he did today, a very light sanding and wiped it with a wet cloth to show what it might look with just a clear varnish, and really is beautiful. So feeling very encouraged about that. Okay, so next, we have some site and landscaping considerations, and I do want to note here that these are all just preliminary recommendations, largely because finalizing these is going to require further coordination with adjacent property owners, the Virginia Tech Foundation, the Wendy's property, and other stakeholders are involved in this. So these are just initial recommendations, largely made by Beth Carson, who is our horticulturalist. But here is the site context, is that given that this is the last building in the Newtown neighborhood, we really want to elevate the importance of this building by making thoughtful decisions about the site and its landscaping. We know we want to protect sight lines to the building from key vantage points, but we also want to reduce traffic noise and make it feel more protected. So those are kind of in tension, and we're trying to figure out how to do that well. It's also really important to retain the site's functionality for large events and gatherings, and it's pretty well set up for that right now. So there are opportunities. A former resident of Newtown, Ginger Wagner, has donated plants from her yard that she took from Newtown and moved out to Mount Tabor, and then she let us come dig them up and bring them back. And so our horticulturalist is currently doing plant things at her office to get them ready for replantation, but also to identify other options for interpretive site elements, benches, and art. So I'll get coming close to wrapping up here. After the working group had its initial set of recommended actions, we wanted to check back in with the community to make sure that we were doing this in alignment with what the larger community would support. So we had a draft report and a feedback survey that we posted to the Let's Talk Plattsburgh project page. We also publicized it widely over our social media and Citizens Alert. We offered a drop-in style community meeting at the Oddfellows Hall in October. About 50 people came. They generally gave very positive verbal comments to the folks who were there. We also had quite a few visitors to the Let's Talk page. Almost all of them opened and viewed the report, which was nice. And the slide is a little bit cut off here, but we ended up getting 33 full responses to the online survey. And I just want to share with you one of the key questions, or the first question in the survey was, do you feel that these proposed actions generally align with Condition 3 in the Deed of Gift, which is to preserve the Oddfellows Hall structure, maintain it, and restore it in accordance with accepted historic building standards? And as you can see, there was very strong agreement that that was the case, and a little bit of somewhat agree, and only one respondent said somewhat disagree. We also asked additional questions on each of the specific recommended actions, asking if any elements were being overlooked, how any should be taking priority, or any alternative or additional actions that should be considered that hadn't been. What we found is that there was more support than concern for all of the recommended actions by a pretty wide margin, about a 5-to-1 or more, or higher rather. That said, the working group did give thoughtful consideration to all of the feedback that they received and did adjust some of the recommended actions based on what they heard from the community. So we have our 28 recommended actions that fall across these 4 categories of architectural, electrical, structural and building envelope, and mechanical and HVAC, as well as 5 preliminary recommendations for site and landscaping. And I'm not going to read all of these to you, but just to touch on a couple of them. This item, I want to give you a little context. On the first floor, we had a lot of conversations about how to address the first floor. There's a lot of surface imperfections. There's some areas that are sticky. But there's also a real sense that we don't want to remove the character of the floor or the patina of the floor. But where we landed is we don't want to exacerbate the stickiness problem by adding more sealant on top of it. It won't bite in, it'll just make it worse. And so we landed on doing a minimally invasive hand sanding and resealing of that floor, which I saw the test area this morning that the historic paint and finish specialist had done in a kind of an unobtrusive area, and it does in fact leave a lot of character of the floor, but got down below that level of that sticky old varnish that's still there. So I feel encouraged that that's going to work well. Again, I had pictures, but I'll send them to you later. I already touched on this issue of new museum grade lighting fixtures, but here are the other elements that we're recommending to upgrade with the electrical. I also touched upon, the top one is structural reinforcement. Another element under structural and building envelope elements is restoring the understage storage. We don't have photographs from that era. We have memories from still living members of our community who were present when the Oddfellows Hall was in use. And where we have landed is the stage apron used to be removable, and there was storage under there. And there are specific memories of the types of things. I think there was a bingo roller under there. I don't think we're going to put that there, but we want to be able to restore that, so we're going to make the stage apron removable and recreate that storage, which will also be helpful just for storing items that are needed in the hall for events. And then again, an initial recommendation was to put a dehumidifier on the second floor, and I want to call this one out because this was an adjustment based on feedback that we received after the survey went out, that it would be important to have data tracking capability for the dehumidifier. So we've added that as a recommendation, because that will make it even safer to store fragile artifacts on the site, which currently they aren't stored there because there's no way to control the temperature and humidity on the site. And then, looking at the site and landscaping, I think that there are lots of ideas about not just landscaping, but hardscaping elements. There's been conversations about restoring the historic light pole with some interpretive elements about how the community children were sent out to pull on the chain. We're not going to have a pull chain light, but we're thinking about ways to incorporate that history into the site again. And so I'll close there and see if you all have any questions for me.
Any questions? Thank you so much.
I just have one comment. Carol was one of the best facilitators of this project that we could hope to have. So thank you very much.
Okay. That concludes the presentation section of the meeting. We'll move on to the consent agenda. We have 2 items on the consent agenda tonight. One is the Town Council minutes for January 28th, February 4th, and February 11th. And the second one is the Downtown Facade Grant Program Guidelines, and we'll be approving both of those tonight. What is the council's pleasure on the consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Oliver?
Aye.
Ford?
Aye.
Mattingly?
Aye.
Sutphen?
Aye.
Watson?
Aye.
Anderson?
Aye.
The motion passes. We'll move on to public hearings, of which we have none tonight. And now we will go into the citizens' comments section of the meeting. In this section, anyone's welcome to come and speak. Please speak at the podium, state your name and address, and limit your speaking time to a maximum of 3 minutes. We have the lights here that will indicate when it's 30 seconds and when your time is up.
My name is Laura Purcell, and I've lived at 826 Toms Creek Road for 17 years. For context, we bought our house because it's walking distance to my and my husband's employment and across the street from my kids' elementary school. It's a life choice that reflects my values. And tonight I'm here to speak about the proposal at 801 North Main Street. I understand that our community simply needs more bedrooms, and I get that the North Main location is not cute. However, this proposed building is too tall, too dense, and too disruptive for this community. In 2019, you all, with the exception of Councilmember Watson, passed a resolution stating that you would not prioritize student housing. For any new student housing, you said you would encourage redevelopment of older housing units. We're supporting infrastructures already available, and that's not the case here. You said housing proposals would need to have significant square footage dedicated to commercial, and this does not. It actually removes commercial space and duplicates the kind of commercial property that sits empty all over town. You said you would avoid lifestyle conflicts with adjacent neighborhoods. Adding almost 800 humans and 8 stories to a neighborhood of 1- and 2-story homes does not seem like avoiding lifestyle conflicts or being sensitive. I completely understand increasing density at places like the Edge and the Hub. However, what surprised me living here and living where I do is 0 services and infrastructure improvement added to support that density. There are protected bike lanes in Roanoke, but not here. I was told that a traffic calming process, which is free through revenue sharing and used in the county, is too expensive. The bus doesn't run more frequently. It did before 2020. And a bigger bus is not the same as a more frequent bus. If that's your counter argument, then you're telling me you don't ride the bus. My neighbors have spent years shuttled from corridor meetings to traffic meetings to safety meetings in an attempt to improve our community. And it's frustrating to get passed around, get excuses, and have nothing done. This proposal says the developer will improve a floodplain that is only under their apartment building, with no other improvements to the area, and none slated in the current CIP. and that's our benefit. A neighbor of mine reached out to a member of council about this development, and that council member told my neighbor that council's given up on our end of town. And I guess you have a real opportunity to express that with your vote on March 11th. I encourage you to vote against this proposal as is, as it doesn't fit the guidelines of your own resolution.
Thank you. We're still under citizen comments. Do we have any other speakers tonight?
What up, Town Council? My name's Zachary Weiss. I live at 1003 South Main Street. What's more important, censoring a council member without discussion or actually helping people? What's more important, is it walking around town figuring out people's needs? Do you actually help people? I'm sure that you help people. I'm not saying you don't. But I don't see you around town except Vice Mayor Sulfin at Anytime Fitness getting swole. Remember, it's a journey. It's not a fad. What else? I only see Blacksburg grounds workers really around town that keep this town clean and as beautiful as it can get legally. So, why do I pay taxes for y'all? I'm sure it's to restore historic buildings and to maintain the roads and, our public utilities and all that stuff. But you don't seem to have events that involve people. Not your workshops or the necessary town meetings. Plus, there aren't, your workshops aren't really advertised outside of this forum, so maybe you should consider having more things like that. Do you actually want to involve the people of Blacksburg, or is censoring a fellow councilman more important? Oh, and sorry, the Madam Mayor is not here in attendance, and that's unfortunate because I would love to see her and look her in the eyes while I'm talking about this. Hopefully she's watching on Zoom, or not on Zoom, but on YouTube because they're streaming this right now. But I implore y'all to consider what's more important, your action and lack thereof. Voice your opinions on contingent issues. I respect your honesty of opinion and reasons more than closed-door conversations and preset decisions without understanding that thought process. Are you more interested in maintaining the status quo or helping people? You only have so much millions of dollars in the general fund budget to do so. Don't latch onto the first thing you hear about, but rather actually pay attention to the people that you talk to, but engage with those that you don't normally. Learn about the problems at play. You currently do not have, and I've heard this many times, I've been here for over a year talking to you guys, but you currently do not have adequate means to garner public opinion right now from your constituents' mouths. So you have any ideas? Well, I've been asking you multiple times to stream your work hours on Twitch or YouTube just like you're doing now. What's one way that you can guarantee to your constituents that you're doing what they're asking you to do? Not through this meeting, because you obviously don't have discussions about it. You just bring up things and you say what you're going to do. But and you do fun events. I love stepping out, and all the things, but that happens once a year, and I think that there should be more community involvement. If you would give me a little bit more time, digital forums, emailed or mailed advertisements, links to digital forums on those advertisements, and discussion rooms that anyone can access and leave info on. Not just your workshops, but places in town that people can go and maker spaces or something like that you guys frequent. So I can go and have coffee with you.
And you're 30 seconds over time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are still in citizen comments. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Leslie Harwood. I'm at 1021 Montgomery Street in Blacksburg. So good evening, members of the Town Council and fellow residents. My name is Leslie Harwood, and I stand before you tonight because I'm deeply concerned about the proposed 8-story development in our town at 801 North Main Street. The project is unprecedented in its scale, its impact, and its disregard for the very principles as we as a community have stood by. There are several reasons that I and others are concerned about the currently proposed development, including the size, scope, and parking issues. I want to touch on two important points tonight in detail. In 2019, Resolution 2F19 was passed and ultimately stated, in part, student housing proposals in commercial districts should include significant square footage dedicated to commercial and office uses. Applications for student-oriented housing should be thoughtfully designed and geared specifically to the Blacksburg community while being sensitive to the context of the site. And yet here we are considering a massive high-income apartment complex that primarily caters to housing Virginia Tech students. This is not the type of development that our town needs. We're in the middle of an extreme housing crisis, one created by years of restrictive zoning and ordinances, and yet, instead of addressing the need for affordable housing, we're looking at luxury apartments charging $1,500 per bedroom. That's not a solution, it's a cash grab. Speaking of cash, I do understand that the developer is offering the town $1.1 million, but let's do the math. With 750 beds at $1,500 each, this developer is set to make over $13 million a year, and that's just in rent. The town's share, a one-time payment that barely makes a dent in our long-term needs, and that's not a fair deal. Beyond housing, and pointing back to the 2019 resolution, stating that there should be a significant square footage dedicated to commercial and office usage, this development is set to take away a significant amount of commercial space, replacing it with what? A fraction of the space that it's taking. The developer should at least be required to put back the commercial space that they're taking. A development of this size should be contributing more to our local economy and not less. Without meaningful commercial space, this project takes away jobs, walkable retail, and the character of our town. And finally, let's talk about Virginia Tech. The university does plan to grow, but trends across the country do show some concerning signs. There have been some conflicting data about freshman enrollment in recent years, but there's also been federal cuts impacting research funding and beyond, and we have no guarantees that student population will continue expanding. So what happens if this development is approved and enrollment trends downward? We'll be left with an oversized, overpriced complex with empty units that don't serve the people who actually live here. Yet, despite all of this, it does look like all I've seen from the mayor especially is in praise of this development. I do urge the council to step back and take time to reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Pete Maceda. I live at 502 Lee Street, and I'm not going to talk about what you think I'm going to talk about right now. The things that everybody's been speaking about today are definitely important, and I probably think about them more than anyone in this town. But what I wanted to do was thank you all. Almost all of you, well, no, every single one of you who I've contacted, I haven't contacted you, Michael, has spoken to me directly and spent an extensive amount of time talking to me. I haven't reached out to you because I haven't had any more time to do it. But I really feel like all of you have listened to what I've had to say and that you've listened to the community members on this project. I think that it's really important that you are appreciated for doing that. That's a big deal. I know that a lot of people don't feel like you listen. You don't feel like they don't feel supported. But I was in a very unique situation, and all of you have responded and given me opportunity to speak. At the work session meeting a couple weeks back, Mary Hager-Smith mentioned the fellow who owns the building. And I think Lauren Wisman said, he's right here. And he gave me a chance to speak there. I wasn't prepared to do that, but I really appreciated it. I think that there's perspectives that you can get from the people in the town, and you're seeing that from some of the voices of the gentleman who spoke earlier, that he wants an opportunity to interact with you and to get feedback from you and learn more about the town. I know how hard it is to to be doing something extra in addition to the rest of your life. And you're doing that here. You're just amazing support of this town, and I know how hard it is. And I know these documents that are like hundreds and hundreds of pages, and you're relying on like great staff at the town to support you and provide you information on that. But I really just wanted to thank you and encourage you to continue having conversations with the outside stakeholders. I will talk a little bit about this project, and the one thing is that I didn't hear about it until the sign went up across the street and said there was going to be a zoning meeting. And that was hard for me to accept, because I think that all of you know me at some level, know my business at some level, and I would have loved to be reached out to about that. I know it's difficult, but I just want to thank you so much for the support you've given me and others on this project, and that you've been listening to the people who come in and really taking that into account when you're making these decisions. But I feel like it's so important that you get the information from the right stakeholders, and not the people who have something to gain from it, but the folks who have something to lose. So thank you.
Thank you. We are still in citizen comment. Anyone else wishing to speak tonight? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close citizen comments. Next up, we have appointments. We do have one appointment tonight. That's for Jason Karras to the Montgomery Regional Economic Development Commission. This is outside of our usual appointment schedule because the previous Blacksburg representative, Paul Lancaster, stepped down from that position. Do we have a motion on this appointment?
I move approval of the appointment of Jason Karras to Montgomery Regional Economic Development Commission.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ford.
Aye.
Mattingly.
Aye.
Sutphen.
Aye.
Watson.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Oliver.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. On to unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business tonight? What about new business? Any new business before the council tonight?
I'll briefly bring up that I think it might be worthwhile for us to begin a conversation about possibly live streaming our work session, since we've heard some feedback tonight, and I've seen it in my inbox increasingly over the last few weeks. It might be a good idea to invite more public participation, or at least more public visibility into those conversations that we have, like the county does. So maybe that's more of a conversation for a work session in the future, but did want to bring that up publicly here now.
Yeah, I think it's certainly something we can discuss at our next work session. Any other new business? What about council announcements?
I just have one. I want to make sure everybody knows that March is Women's Month. It's probably many other months too, but it's Women's Month at Virginia Tech. Lots of great programming, and if you want to see the full calendar, just go to the Virginia Tech page, type in Women's Center, and you'll find the calendar under the Women's Center site. So do check it out. Lots of good things going on. And since we've been talking a little bit tonight about communication, I do want to remind everybody that there are many ways to reach us. There are many ways for us council members to reach out to you all too. But things like Blacksburg Alert, if you're interested in zoning issues and things like that, if you're on Blacksburg Alert, you can sign up to find out just about Parks and Rec stuff or about everything that comes out of our communications office. But it's a way for you to get an email about all the things that are going on in town. If you want to check out our website, our homepage of blacksburg.gov, it has upcoming calendar events that pertain to the town. And speaking to one of our members who spoke during citizens' comment tonight, I don't think I've ever been approached for a conversation over coffee, but I will assure you that if you contact me, I will meet with you. I have never stopped meeting with or denied meeting with a citizen or a resident or a tourist who wanted to talk to me. And I suspect everybody up here at the podium is the same way. So remember, if you go to the town website, all of our email addresses individually are up there. Or if you want to have a blanket, hey, meet with us, we can meet with you one or two at a time. You can check out Blacksburg, Town Council at blacksburg.gov. So please, if you want to reach out to us, I think I can speak for us that we want to talk to you.
And I'd also like to add, if you want to learn more about town, you talk about workshops, et cetera, we offer a program called Citizens Institute that you could learn everything you wanted to know about town functions, get to know a lot of people. There are opportunities.
There's also a police academy, right?
Jerry Ford and I are actually 2009 graduates of the Blacksburg Citizens Institute, and look at us now. Any other council announcements?
Yes, I just wanted to remind folks that our business licenses are due by Monday. I just worked on mine today, and I was hopeful to pay it online because there was a letter in the thing, but it was actually under construction for another couple days, but you can mail it or what have you. I also wanted to thank our police and our public works for helping with all the downed trees from last week. I had one down at my house, and I had a police officer come with his own chainsaw to help me and my boys move this ginormous tree. And by the time we'd all gotten it done, the bulldozer came and moved the rest of it. But I'm very grateful for all the help that we had. When I called, they told me that I was number 90 to call about a tree down that morning. So that was a lot of work.
And I want to thank our citizens, too. This one young man came by our house. My husband and I are in our 60s and 70s, and we were out there lugging ice-covered branches and pulling big limbs and sawing, and this young man came by and said, I can help you. And we were like, no, we've got it, but thank you. And he actually came back by with a little hand saw to see if he could help. So people were really great during this whole process.
Any other announcements? Our next Town Council work session will be Tuesday, March 4th, and our next Town Council regular meeting in these chambers will be Tuesday, March 11th, and with that, we are adjourned.